At the dawn of the 1980s, Magnum TA burst onto the wrestling scene. With his athleticism, charisma, and movie star good looks, he quickly became a top star for Jim Crockett Promotions and a valuable weapon in the company's war against Vince McMahon.
All the big guns come here when they want to get it done, and that's why Magnum TA is here.
At that point in time, Jim Crockett Promotions was the only other wrestling promotion in the country that had the ability to compete with Vince McMahon.
There's only one Hulk Hogan, Daddy.
I believe that Magnum could have been for Crockett what Hulk Hogan was for WWF.
There's only one Magnum TA. There will ever be only one Magnum TA.
It was like being a rock star. I was given the keys to the city. The sky is the limit.
But Magnum's meteoric rise to fame and fortune would end in an instant.
Blow took me right into the roof, and my C5 vertebrae exploded,
throwing his life and career into tragedy and chaos.
He is in the intensive care unit at Charlotte Memorial Hospital.
Terry Allen was the future. You put all your cards in that basket, and the basket was turned over.
This, devastating thing changed everyone's reality.
Healthy, wealthy, wise. All of a sudden, boom, gone.
The story of Magnum TA is the story of what might have been, not just for the man himself, but for the entire wrestling world.
He was told he would not walk again.
This is WrestleMania. This is the thing of today. Hulkamania is running wild.
In the early 1980s, professional wrestling explodes in popularity, dominated by Vince McMahon, his star Hulk Hogan, and his powerhouse promotion, the WWF.
This Vince McMahon is a genius.
But down south, a rival wrestling company stands in defiance of the growing McMahon empire.
They know that Jim Crockett, the Wrestling Network, is the best thing going. That's why they're here. Yeah!
As smaller companies across the country fold, Jim Crockett Promotions represents one of the last lines of defense against the WWF's nationwide takeover. But where the WWF showcases kid-friendly cartoon personas, Crockett's brand of pro wrestling is a world of blood, grit, and glamour.
Soon to appear on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, Mr. Jim Cornette.
I'm Jim Cornette. I've been involved in wrestling for over 40 years, but in the 1980s, I was one of the managers that led many of Magnum TA's opponents to the ring. Crockett in the Carolinas had a tremendously strong base of fans, and also that roster from Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, the Road Warriors, the Rock and Roll Express. It went on and on. That was the gathering place now for all the top wrestlers that were going to oppose Vince McMahon.
Crockett Promotions, around 1985. We are on the rise. We're clicking on all four cylinders. My name is David Crockett. Jim Crockett is my father.
And I'm Tony Schiavone, joined by Mr. Jim Crockett, president of Jim Crockett Promotions.
You had Vince McMahon, WWF, that was wanting to take over the country.
It is well documented in the official World Wrestling Federation magazine that Mr. Hogan's popularity is indeed worldwide.
And we liked what we were doing, so we said, nah, that's not gonna happen. We had a great stable of wrestlers.
Nobody can beat the American dream!
But we needed that special something.
Crockett needed somebody for the future. And if you had a character, kick-ass babyface over here and a legend over here, you always needed the matinee idol, the movie star, right there in the middle of everything.
Who would be the good guy?
Earliest memories of television, like 6, 7 years old, were watching professional wrestling with my dad. And it evoked all these emotions of watching guys that were like real live action superheroes. So as a little kid, you start thinking, maybe this is something I could do. And I was the most unlikely guy to be doing this because I had no athletic background. My name is Terry Allen, better known as Magnum TA. I started out wrestling in the 9th grade, and I applied myself to it like nothing I'd ever done. So as I worked my way up the ranks, by the time I'm a senior, I ended up winning the state tournament.
Magnum is from Norfolk, Virginia, And he was working at a bar in Virginia Beach, and that's where tons of the Carolina wrestlers would go, because that was kind of a vacation spot. When you were up in that part of Virginia for the weekend, the guys would go party in Virginia Beach.
In the 70s, I was in college and I was working security in nightclubs and bars, and the wrestlers would come down to the place where I worked. And, they're, ribbing with me, and because I'm a big guy. There was a guy there that saw me, and his name was Buzz Sawyer.
Buzz Sawyer was one of the most talented in-ring performers in the history of wrestling, and was one of the most obnoxious, crooked, surly, and discontented son of a bitches in the world outside of him.
So Buzz Sawyer sees me, he all buddy. So look, it's really hard to get into this business, but I can help you. But I feel like this guy is really gonna help me. So now I see this as a potential career path. So he comes even to my parents' home and talks with all of us. Tells us, how tough the business is to get in, but he has these inroads and he can help me. And he tells me a wrestling license costs $10,000. 10 grand. And my mom and dad are like, 10 grand. 10 grand might as well have been 100 grand in 1979. My mom believed in me. And she went to her dad, my granddaddy Smith, and he gave me the money. He said, I believe in you. And so we give him the money, and so I'm going to get in. He's going to get me in the door. And next thing I know, Buzz has left the Carolinas. Poosh, mind blown.
Buzz was just trying to bilk an aspiring young man out of some money and saw where he could get it. He was an asshole. Wrestling licenses are still a real thing, and were a real thing at that point in states that have athletic commissions. If they have an athletic commission, you have to be licensed to be a wrestler, a manager, an announcer, whatever. They generally cost between $10 and $25. So Buzz Sawyer wasn't going to sell Magnum TA any kind of wrestling license.
Did you ever get that money back from Buzz Sawyer?
No. So one night I tell Jimmy Garvin my Buzz Sawyer story. Jimmy knew Buzz. He knew all too well what was going on.
Garvin does not lose his cool as quickly as Sawyer.
I encouraged him to go find Buzz and ask Buzz to hook him up. And I literally believe he left the next day and drove to Oregon.
I found out what his apartment number was and knocking on the door. He opens the door, kind of surprised to see me. So he takes me down to the ring the next day, and I work out for 2 solid hours. I learn how to tie up, hit the ropes, do some spots, take a backdrop.
It wasn't uncommon in those days if a guy saw some young prospective talent that wanted to train or wanted to be taught, yeah, I'll take this guy, he's an idiot, we'll run him off, whatever. But in this case, it came back to bite him because Magnum turned out to be a bigger star than Buzz ever was.
And the next night, I wrestled Buzz on television. They all think, hey, you did a pretty good job. They think I've been in the business. They think I'm trained. They think Buzz trained me. Well, he did. He trained me for 2 hours. And then I got booked 7 nights a week.
I knew Magnum from the get-go. He burst onto the scene, man, and he was a breath of fresh air to watch.
Jake the Snake Roberts!
I am what's left of Jake the Snake Roberts. He was no sucker, man. He was just so hungry and wanted it so bad.
Terry's unrelenting drive and raw talent earn him admiration from promoters, fans, and fellow wrestlers. His hard work pays off when a single phone call propels his career to new heights.
Betty Graham, that owns Florida Championship Wrestling. So he, boom, picks up the phone, gives me a call. He said, I got a spot for you. And so again, I pack up all my belongings and off I go back across the country and head south. That's where the true education of the wrestling business really started, the day I stepped foot in the territory of Florida.
From Virginia Beach, Virginia, weighing in at 240 pounds, Terry Allen.
So when I first came to the territory in Florida, the booker, the creative development guy, American Dream Dusty Rhodes. Never met him. I've seen his pictures on the cover of magazines.
Oh, Dusty Rhodes was one of the greatest wrestlers ever, man. the best showman ever, without a doubt. He was our Muhammad Ali.
The booker of a major wrestling promotion is like the major motion picture director in Hollywood. He decides the final say on the actors, who's going to play the parts, how they're going to do it, what their demeanor is, the way that the thing is shot. So the booker was the director, and Dusty Rhodes saw in Magnum TA his next movie star.
Dusty had the potential to see talent and charisma within people that didn't know how to bring it out.
Right here is the global tag team champion, Terry Allen.
And he became the most influential guy on my career of anybody that I ever came in contact with.
Dusty pushed Magnum TA to the heights of pro wrestling. He believed in him, he teamed with him, they were personal friends. Hello everyone, this is Bill Apter, and I am the most recognizable journalist and independent broadcaster in the world of pro wrestling for the past 51 years. People used to say that he looked like Tom Selleck, and Andre the Giant thought so much about that he said to Magnum,
"You look like Tom Selleck, you should call yourself Magnum TA."
And that's how it happened.
Back in the 80s, there was a TV show with a star named Tom Selleck, and it was about a detective, and his name was Magnum P.I. So Andre looks over at me and he says, "Boss," he said, "you're ready." And I said, what do you mean I'm ready? He said, "You're ready for something." He said, "But you need a handle." So he tied it all together and took the Magnum and the Terry Allen TA and put that name together.
After just over a year in Florida, Magnum TA returns to the road, this time joining the high-octane wrestling circuit known as Mid-South.
Magnum TA.
Action continues now. The popular star, Magnum TA. Here's Buddy Nichols to tell us about it.
Really a very personable young man, one with a lot of wrestling talent, and as we mentioned last week, one with a lot of desire and an opportunity to go a long way in this wrestling business.
So I come to Mid-South as Magnum TA. I don't know what Magnum TA means at this point in time. It's a name. I don't know how this translates into me, and nor do the people that have brought me in. So one week they're telling me to wear suits and ties. And we do that for a couple weeks and they say, "You don't really seem comfortable in that." So then they say, well, maybe, punk rock was kind of a thing. They want me to wear like some punk rock clothes. I'm not comfortable at all in this, but we go through all these little things they trying to do. Nothing's clicking. So I called Dusty up. I said, I need to do something else. They don't know what to do with me. And he said, "I got it, baby. I got it. It's all good." He said, "Well, I'll tell you what you do." He said, "You go down and buy you a brand new Harley Davidson." So I bought a motorcycle jacket when I bought the new bike, and I ride that bike into town with that jacket on, and everybody looks. And it changed the whole perception immediately of who I was. Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson and Bruce Lee and John Wayne all wrapped up in one package in a leather jacket.
He had the perfect look for professional wrestling, the perfect size, the physique, the face, the whole 9 yards.
This incredible it factor that I had not seen in a lot of pro wrestlers. He had it.
He was going up the ladder, man. He had it all. He burned it up there for a while. And of course, not very long.
Magnum TA is a rising star and a fan favorite in the Mid-South territory when he receives an offer that will change the course of his career.
I get the phone call and Dusty says, "I want to introduce you to Jim Crockett." He puts Jim Crockett on the phone with me and says, "Look, and I will promise you, if you come here, I will give you the greatest opportunity that anybody could ever ask for in the business."
I first met Magnum TA when he walked into the office. Here's this tall, 6'1", 6'2", very well built, blonde hair coming down, these piercing eyes, and this husky, raspy voice. Looking at the women in the office, they all, they do that. So that is the total package. The camera, who is the main judge, loved him.
All the fans have been waiting for this man, Magnum TA, and here he is.
You didn't have to put lights on to make him look good. He glowed.
Magnum TA is coming to Mid-Atlantic for one reason only, coming for the U.S. Heavyweight Championship.
Almost immediately, Crockett goes and barters a deal to go on TBS on the Superstation. The moment we went on the Superstation, everything changed. The territory started popping immediately, and we blew the roof off the place.
My name is Tamara Howell, and I was married to Terry Allen. We were together from 1981 until 1988. He got this raincoat jacket. He loved it. It was his Jesse James look. We did talk about having a family, but we were waiting until he became the World Championship title holder. Here we were at the baptism of Dusty and Michelle's son, Cody. It's pretty special.
The minute I make the emotional decision that I'm gonna settle down and I'm gonna get married, immediately my career path says, we wanna promote you as a sex symbol. We want you to be our superstar. We want you to be the people everybody tear their hair out and want to get hold of.
He was the rock star. The cheers for Magnum were the squeals of the women in the audience. It was hysteria.
It was just absolute insanity. And it was the wild, wild west from the partying standpoint, the girls in every port and every place. It was bad. You know, it was like Animal House 24/7. It was more than any red-blooded male could handle.
They were getting the motel key and panty treatment every night. It was insane. They had more sex on the way to the ring than I've had in my life.
You always play to the audience, whether it's male or female. I mean, the women crying, they want to get close to him after the match and get blood off of him. And, you know, and, I'll never wash my hands again.
Well, I definitely could see his popularity. We were in a mall, we were in a boot store, and this girl just fainted seeing him. She got all flustered and turned red and fainted. So I think if everyone thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread, you might start believing that. I didn't work outside of the home. I always would unpack his wrestling bag from the night before. And when I was doing that, he had pictures in there. I had taken out the pictures and I just was flipping through them. And then I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have that bag. I thought it was me in the picture, but she had a different handbag than I would have carried, and I realized that wasn't me, and I hadn't been wherever they were, so.
As Terry's rising fame pushes his marriage to the brink, a powerful opponent emerges, a Soviet-era strongman, bringing the Cold War to the wrestling ring.
Was I intimidated by Magnum TA? I think it was the other way around. I think he was intimidated by me. I am Nikita Koloff, better known to the wrestling fans as the Russian Nightmare, Shatoita.
You think he's going to run? Take a look at Nikita now. 22 inches now.
I hail from the great state of Minnesota, not from Russia like I portrayed back in the wrestling days.
Well, in the 80s, the United States and Russian political situation, here you have Magnum TA, American-made. So you had the Russian might against American-made.
Magnum TA, or Mega TA, as I used to call him, he had that whole look of that all-American. I'm like, man, this is, you might say, a match made in heaven.
And they had this incredible series, the Best of 7 series. It was one of the greatest feuds in pro wrestling history.
Between the #1 challenger, who is Nikita Koloff, and the former champion Magnum TA.
There's got to be a clear-cut winner for 4 matches. And Nikita Koloff, there's never going to be a day in my life that I had to look up to a Russian and call you a superior athlete.
Match #1, I have set myself to be this physical specimen, and so to go up 1-0. So the way we just built the story and how each match was finished, you know, whether it was a dominating victory on my part, going up 2-0, and then to go up 3-0, And then he catches me by surprise and he wins that first 3-1.
And the winner of match number 4, Magnum TA!
He slips by and wins 3-2. Oh my gosh, there's hope. There's hope for America. Match number 6, and he squeaks out another victory, and now it's 3-3, and it's going to come down to that final match number 7.
The man standing before you right now is a man that's going to take it all home, bring it home right here, United States of America.
It couldn't have been set up any better. And Nikita Koloff gets the 1-2-3. Man, I want to tell you, the fans were not happy that night, boy. Talk about heat. The heat on me elevated to a whole nother level. And so, of course, Magnum, now he's got to chase and get back that U.S. title. That, by the way, set you up as #1 contender for the World Heavyweight title back in those days. Now the chase is on.
1986 was pretty much the culmination of a long-running rivalry between Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair for the world title. And next in line, whenever that trigger would have been pulled, was Ric Flair and Magnum TA. Into 87, 88, that would have been the direction they were going. Who's going to be the world champion? Who's going to be the dominant guy in the NWA? Ric Flair or Magnum TA?
In the 70s, 80s, the National Wrestling Alliance World's Heavyweight title was the most coveted wrestling title you could go after. That 10 pounds of gold belt was an amazing thing.
And he was going to get that, no doubt about it, because the powers that be loved him, you know, and they trusted him.
The powers that be are the promoters of the National Wrestling Alliance, the governing body of the majority of the nation's regional territories, including Jim Crockett Promotions.
There was a meeting that Dusty and I and Jim Crockett had where we flew up to New York, went out to dinner, and they told me that the decision had been made, the NWA had blessed it, and that I was going to be the next World's Heavyweight Champion. The trajectory was to take the next step, move away from Nikita so I can move back into that chase. But in the meantime, we've got this new brash, fresh, smack-talking heel named Jimmy Garvin that comes in, and we got this great new opportunity.
This is gorgeous Jimmy Garvin.
And this angle with Terry and Patty and I was going to be huge.
And I have confidence because I know that I'm the greatest athlete in the world and nobody could beat me.
But, you know, I had that match with him in Greenville, South Carolina that night. A heck of a match, and we were getting ready to blow the territory wide open. It just never happened because that was the night of this incident.
And now, here's your host, senior editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Bill Apter.
Last week's show with Magnum TA got such a great response, we've asked the U.S. champ, Magnum TA, to be with us again this week. Magnum, 1985 was a darn good year for you. What's 86 have in store for you?
Well, 86 will be a continuation of the quest that I started in 1985, which was for the World's Heavyweight Championship held by Ric Flair.
He was going right to the top. I could not see any road taking him anywhere else except to the top.
We had everything sunk into him. Terry Allen was the future.
As Magnum TA closes in on the heavyweight title, he begins living the life of a world champion.
At that time, I had more money than I had since. I'd walked in the Porsche dealership and they had a brand new 911 Turbo sitting all on the floor. And that was the Mac Daddy. Write me up, I'm taking it. It was quick and it was cool. And I had the need for speed like Top Gun. You know, if it had a combustion engine in it and it was loud and it was fast, I liked it. My plan was to have a run with the belt, 27, by the time I'm 30, out of it, and then go drive NASCARs. I didn't want to be running around in my underwear in front of people at 30-some years old. I thought that was ridiculous.
On October 14th, 1986, after defeating gorgeous Jimmy Garvin in front of a roaring crowd in South Carolina, Magnum TA hits the road in his prized Porsche 911.
I'm 5 minutes from my house. I'm on a 2-lane road, and I've driven hundreds of times. It's like the horse turns the corner and knows the barn's right there, and I'm on the track. It was raining so hard, coming back you could barely see. The road that I was traveling on that night had a little slight bend curve in it. Right in the middle of the curve was a little divot in the road where water had gathered, probably 2-3 inches of water all the way across the road. When I went around the corner and that dip right in the middle of the car hydroplaned. When a car hydroplanes, it means your tire patch loses contact with that road. So my tires were actually floating on top of that water. So I did what I had done before to counteract something, and I made the situation worse. The car spun violently the other direction, and I broadsided a telephone pole so hard that I cut it in half. It happened so fast, it was violent, and the blow was like I had been hit by a freight train. I didn't know I was not okay until I couldn't move. And I was so big in the car that my shoulder was right up against the door, and I had just maybe an inch of headroom. So the blow took me right into the roof. The emergency crew came, and one of them grabbed me by my jacket to try to pull me up. And the other guy stopped and said, no, I can't move. So they used the jaws of life, cut the whole top of the car off, peeled it back like a tin can, stabilized me. They couldn't airlift me out because it was raining so hard. It took me by ambulance. It changed my life. It changed the people I worked for. It changed my family. It changed everybody in a nanosecond.
The police called me. They were taking him to the hospital. On my way to the hospital, I was behind the tow truck that had his Porsche on it, and to see the Porsche the way it was very frightening. The roof was off. It was a mess. It looked like he probably was dead. Well, they took me aside and they told me that he had fractured his vertebrae. They needed to get him into surgery quickly.
My first view of a medical professional that's giving me a diagnosis, he used the words C5 quadriplegic and neck down paralysis. 1,000,000-to-1 shot of ever attaining any level of mobility beyond sitting in a wheelchair and being taken care of by someone for the rest of your life. Matter of fact, they were just trying to figure out how I was going to breathe. They said my lungs were paralyzed. They were saying things to me like, well, maybe you might be able to be on an iron lung instead of a ventilator.
The guy's in intensive care. They've got him all hooked up. They keep him sedated. You just feared for the worst. It was, is he truly going to make it? What was going through his mind?
They're shooting me up with morphine every time I blink because they can't communicate with me. If I try to communicate anything, they think I'm hurting. So I'm in such bad shape, they're just zapping me with the moon and stars.
My brother came in, he just said, he'll never, ever get in the ring again.
According to the police report, Alan was going south here on Sardis Road, away from town, when his car went off the road on the far side back there, about 200 feet. He apparently tried to correct and bring it back onto the road, but it was slippery. And he ended up on this side, slamming into this telephone pole, with enough force to break it in half.
Memorial spokesperson Cecily Newton explained that Magnum has a spinal cord injury that is localized to the 5th cervical vertebrae.
And it exploded. It sent those bone fragments back and created compression on the spinal cord.
It was on every news channel. You saw the pictures of that car, and it's absolute miracle that anybody was alive. It was completely destroyed. It was the front page of the Charlotte Observer.
It's a type of situation where you don't believe it has happened until you actually see him, and no one has been able to see him, so we're still kind of stunned.
Radio, newspaper, we really didn't have internet, so it was all word of mouth.
I'm sorry, ma'am, that's the only thing I'm permitted to release at this time.
Memorial Hospital has fielded some 8,000 to 10,000 phone calls about Magnum TA since the wrestling star was admitted. The hospital lobby looks like a florist convention.
I think he received the most letters of anyone there at their hospital. I do have the newspaper clippings and bags of mail we received.
The hospital got so many calls, they had to shut the switchboard down. There were candlelight vigils of fans outside the hospital.
A lot of people held him close to their heart.
Arian Allen has been with her son since the accident. This afternoon, she wanted to thank all of the people who have sent prayers and cards.
It has been rough in a lot of cases, but I just don't think I could have gotten through this time without all that love and positive energy that I felt flowing around me.
Back in the day, like, we didn't go to the hospital because kayfabe, you know, it was a heel. He was a baby face, so didn't go to the hospital. And we just didn't do it.
In the 1980s, wrestlers and promoters still go to great lengths to maintain the illusion that wrestling is real, a practice known as keeping kayfabe.
So Flair and the Horsemen or any of the heels couldn't go to the hospital and see Magnum. So what they did was, one of our people that worked at the office was also a Charlotte City police officer, and he arranged with the hospital to sneak Flair and some of his guys up a back stairway and into the room in the middle of the night so that nobody would see him, so they could go and see Magnum.
Flair came in my room with the 10 pounds of gold, laid it on my chest, said, "I'm giving you this one, and wait for you to come back in the ring and get the other one."
When Magnum had his accident, he was obviously automatically without income. And in this case, all of the guys on the roster got together and said, we will donate whatever from our check per week to Magnum, and Jim Crockett, as the promoter, would match the total of everything that was collected by the wrestlers. So whether it was $25 a week or $50 a week out of everybody's check, but there were 30 guys, and then he'd match it.
What's your role in his recovery?
I was there every day. I went to the hospital every day, and I helped feed him, bathe him, helped him with everything that he needed.
So I don't really get to have real soul-searching moments about all of this for about 30 days. When things cleared a little bit, I got out of the ICU, got in a room, people were able to start relaying things to me that was going on in the outside world that I was pretty oblivious to.
I love Magnum more than I love everyone else.
It's sad something that happened to a man so talented and good shape. I don't want it to end his career or nothing.
Immediately I felt horrible. Not for me, but for my friends, for Dusty, for Jimmy, because I knew everything they had built around me. Their whole future and plans and everything is built around me. There was no plan B.
Magnum TA was this shooting star that we attached ourselves to. We were flying high with him. There was nothing to stop us. But then that shooting star went dark. And with that, we went dark. We were trying to find our way, just like Magnum was trying to find his way.
I'm on a tour in Japan. My first night back is in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. Dusty and Jim Crockett pulled me into an office, and it took him a few minutes, as I recall, to really convince me, like, no, we're not kidding. Like, this is for real. He's lying in a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina right now, fighting for his life. He's Dusty's guy. He's his bread and butter. He's groomed to be the next world heavyweight champion. So obviously this leaves a void.
The last 2 weeks have been very difficult for Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, because Magnum TA and Dusty Rhodes made their own rules. We love fast cars and fast times, and that's the way we lived on the end of that lightning bolt that crashes through this vast earth of ours.
So Dusty and Crockett and everybody else was faced with, well, what do you do when you're still making a movie but your star is gone? You gotta find a new star. At that point, there was no major wrestling name that was just floating around waiting for a phone call. So Dusty looked within his own roster and said, who can possibly not take Magnum's spot and look like him and act like him and do the same thing that will be seen as a copy of him, but who can take that spot and do it in a completely different way.
And I have a new partner. And that's Nikita Koloff.
I'm like the #1 most hated guy in wrestling right now. I mean, the fans love to hate me, and I'm Russian. At this juncture, I'm only 2.5 years into my career.
With the new plan in place, the challenge becomes selling the story to the fans.
Jim Crockett called me and he says, would you be willing to come up to the hospital? Magnum's asking for you. He needs to talk to his fans nationally about what's going on, and you guys, magazines, are the only way to do this.
Reporting from Magnum's bedside, Bill Apter helps to engineer Nikita's transformation into a babyface hero.
Bill Apter was the only, from the magazine side, that I had built a bond with and I trusted.
The story that was worked on was so heartwarming because Nikita Koloff, and we had a picture of this on one of the wrestling magazines, that there was a tear coming down Nikita's eyes for the cover, and he said, I cry for Magnum TA.
And for the fans, for the very first time, oh my gosh, Nikita really does have a heart.
There was literally millions of people like watching from the sidelines now, that they were looking at this man that's now fighting this real life battle, and they're all pulling for me. How's he gonna handle it? What's he gonna do?
Despite being partially paralyzed and confined to a hospital for months, Terry Allen refuses to give up.
We all love him and we hope he gets better so he can wrestle. If not wrestle, at least, be a part of the NWA still.
In April of 1987, Crockett hatches a plan to bring Magnum TA back at one of their biggest events of the year.
Baltimore Arena, Terry Allen, AKA Magnum TA, is going to make his first appearance back in an arena.
And to see him again in person was just something it's hard to put into words.
For me, watching Terry Allen walk down that aisle, that shows me that you can overcome almost anything and never give up.
I mean, for a guy who is supposed to be lifted out of a bed and fed the rest of his life and bathed and all of that, to be able to walk under his own power was an absolute miracle in and of itself. I mean, I got choked up, like for real, because it was a surreal moment.
I can remember the moment, the emotion, and the feel, and the fans, and just like it was yesterday, it was one of the most emotional moments I've ever experienced. They saw me come from, death's door to never gonna walk again, to my gosh, you walked to the ring.
Despite his enduring popularity, it's clear that Magnum's wrestling days have come to a permanent end, leaving his future uncertain.
It makes you have to adjust your thinking. You try to find a way to fit back into the industry. I was an intelligent guy. I was still well-spoken. So I worked as a color commentator for a while.
I'll be working with you, Magnum. I really look forward to that. I know all the fans in Chicago look forward to seeing you again.
It's going to be great, and I can't wait.
Magnum finding his niche in wrestling after his accident was very hard because being around it, you always want to be back in it.
The hard times continue for Magnum behind the scenes.
We settled into a normal life. I thought our marriage was doing well, but
we stayed together for about a month after I got out of the hospital.
There was some infidelity past the accident. I felt like I had given pretty much everything I had. I just couldn't do that anymore.
And it was so overwhelming for her because the realities of all the things that had taken place on the road, she becomes aware of because I'm forthcoming. And I feel bad about it. This is a bad deal.
I loved him very much. It was hard for me to leave him. But I think at some point you're just like, once something is done again, how many times can you let that happen?
As Terry's relationship ends, the once mighty Crockett Promotions implodes.
At this point, nobody on either side of the wrestling war or any of the fans or the observers realized exactly how crucial this was going to be a point in the wrestling business. All of a sudden, they had to start from scratch.
In 1988, Crockett makes a deal with media mogul Ted Turner, leading to the birth of World Championship Wrestling and the end of an era for wrestling fans.
If Terry Allen had never been in the accident, the future of the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, the sky's the limit.
Do you ever wonder what if about your wrestling career?
I do. I totally would have been satisfied being recognized as the world's heavyweight champion, having my run, having my time in the sun, and passing it off to the next 20-year-old that thought he could do it better.
If he never had the accident, movies, commercials, lifestyle, the World Heavyweight Championship.
When they see Magnum TA come out there to defend the United States Heavyweight Championship, they know that I'm the man that they can stand behind because I'm always out there 100%.
You know, he was right at the brink of becoming the world champion. No doubt. For it to be gone in the blink of an eye, man, it should be a lesson for everybody. You know, that life can change that quick.
One time, I remember Dusty and I, we were in Columbia at the Township Auditorium. We're sitting on the back steps, and he said, can you imagine how successful we could be at something else if we worked as hard at it as we are at this? And he was right. I've used the same commitment with the new opportunity as I had done all those years and attacked it with the same ferocity that I had when I was chasing the world title.
He is an individual that will not give up. Here's a man that is classified as a quadriplegic. He's not going to let it slow him down.
Terry decides to leave the wrestling world behind and sets his sights on a new career far from the squared circle. Along the way, he also finds another chance at love.
My name is Courtney Blanchard Allen, and I am Terry Allen's wife. First met Terry Allen approximately in 1997. Both of us were going through divorces, and we became really, really good friends and leaned on each other a lot for support during that time. And through that friendship, developed an intimacy and a relationship. He's my best friend.
For me, it's another miracle. I was given a chance to have a family, so I've done my best to be steady, make a secure home and a loving home for all the kids, make sure they were all provided and well taken care of and loved. And it's been an amazing ride.
It was the end of Magnum TA, but it wasn't the end of Terry Allen. You can be sad for what could have been, what the wrestling fans could have seen that they would have enjoyed and what he could have accomplished, but you can't be sad overall because he came back from the wreck. He's lived a long life, he's been successful in other things, and he's had a family and fans that still care about him.
That's a pin. That's it. That's got to be some kind of a record. He pinned him. It had to be less than 15 seconds.
Is it tough for him day to day?
Oh, you know it's gotta be. Yeah. He'll never tell you that. He had just a small percentage chance of survival, and his ability to overcome absolutely anything has proven true every day since that accident. If he wasn't at peace with how it ended, it wouldn't be so inspirational. There are so many people out there that want to know more about his story, to be able to do the things that he can do now.
I lived the dream that most people only dream of and never get to see come to fruition. The other what if is, what if I hadn't woke up at all? And I'm so thankful that I did.
An air of normalcy or oblivious to the gathering storm. Scribble a note and left it on Gail's car, a conventional message of their visit. Before departing, they made a casual request to the next-door neighbor, a man attuned to the gentle rhythms of their quiet street, to call if Gail made contact. However, as the clock ticked past 6 o'clock, the neighbor's initial compliance transformed into genuine concern. He knew Gail Mosby. He understood her commitment, her steadfast reliability. The neighbor was concerned because Gail was very responsible. There was some reason why she would not be there. His conviction was not based on idle speculation. It was rooted in years of observing Gail's impeccable character, a profound sense of unease, a premonition that transcended mere worry, prompted him to act. Equipped with a spare key, a symbol of the trust and camaraderie characteristic of that neighborhood, he unlocked Gail's front door and stepped into the stillness of her home, his heart likely pounding with a mixture of apprehension and hope. The interior of the house initially presented a deceptive tableau of peace and order. Everything seemed orderly in the house, which was consistent with the way she did things. She was apparently a neat housekeeper, but everything appeared to be in order. This detail, later dissected by investigative minds, would eventually be reinterpreted not as evidence of serene domesticity, but as a chilling signature of control, a carefully constructed illusion. Yet, this fragile facade of normalcy was about to shatter, revealing the brutal truth beneath. The neighbor's anxious search led him inevitably to the main bathroom, where the illusion disintegrated into an unspeakable scene. He was horrified to find that she was in her bathtub, and Gail Mosby was dead. The stark reality of the discovery painted a grim, chilling picture. She was unclothed. Her body was in the bathtub, with her feet hanging outside the bathtub. Her head was still underwater. The scene on its surface spoke of drowning, a death both tragic and profoundly solitary. She died from drowning. The initial, superficial assessment left little room for other interpretations, steering minds toward a singular, sorrowful conclusion. There was no other explanation for it. In the immediate, emotionally charged moments following the discovery, such an initial assessment is common, a human attempt to categorize and comprehend the incomprehensible. However, it is precisely in these initial moments that the seeds of doubt are sometimes sown, particularly for those with trained eyes and an innate understanding of human suffering. Gail's distraught neighbor, reeling from the traumatic sight, immediately dialed 911, initiating the official cascade of emergency services, police, paramedics, and the grim machinery of criminal investigation. First impressions, the allure of simplicity versus the whispered doubt. The arrival of police and paramedics on the scene minutes later introduced a structured, albeit somber, assessment to the unfolding tragedy. As a standard procedure, law enforcement began by scrutinizing the immediate environment, searching for any telltale signs that might contradict the apparent simplicity of the drowning. When the police arrived, they noticed no sign of a struggle. They didn't see anything being disturbed. The absence of overturned furniture, scuffled rugs, or forced entry lent considerable weight to the preliminary assumption of a self-inflicted death. Adding to this impression, investigators discovered Gail's clothing meticulously arranged. They found her clothes had been folded and left by the bathtub. Such a detail often corresponds with individuals who prepare for their final act, adding a grim sense of personal control to their end. Further corroboration appeared in the form of Gail's private journal. They also found a journal. Its pages revealed a personal struggle, a window into a mind grappling with inner turmoil. She had been having some problems with depression. The raw vulnerability expressed within its entries provided potential, if heartbreaking, motive for an individual contemplating ending their own life. This psychological evidence was augmented by tangible indicators of medical treatment. Also, they did find some prescriptions. I can't specifically recall what they were, but the kinds of things you would expect somebody who had been depressed to have been prescribed. The presence of prescribed antidepressants or anxiolytics. Medications indicative of a diagnosed and treated depressive condition further reinforce the developing narrative. You put that package together, that kind of tips you over towards suicide. From a superficial or even clinically detached perspective, the pieces seem to fit, align in a form of cohesive, albeit tragic, picture of a life voluntarily ended. However, A fundamental principle of criminal investigation mandates a thorough and unbiased evaluation before any definitive conclusion. Even as the tide of initial opinion swayed towards suicide, the seasoned professionals on scene were bound to probe deeper, to challenge every assumption. It was during this critical phase that the fragile consensus began to splinter, revealing a profound dissonance thanks to the discerning observations of an experienced officer. That evening, I was just on active patrol, and I got the call of a deceased subject at that location. The officer, approaching the scene with professional detachment, cataloged the absence of overt indicators of foul play, aligning with the general impression. There was no signs of any disturbance, any foul play. Yet, certain seemingly minor details registered as anomalous, gnawing at his veteran intuition. I did notice that one of her legs had a small bruise on the inside of her left ankle. A bruise, while seemingly insignificant on its own, was out of place in the context of peaceful, self-orchestrated drowning. More disturbing were the direct observations related to the immediate cause of death itself. I could tell there was frothing from the mouth, and there was a small amount of blood in the water, which would indicate the lungs were struggling for air. This was not the placid surrender implied by a self-chosen, deliberate drowning. It was the agonizing evidence of a desperate struggle for breath, a body's primal refusal to succumb. The presence of both froth, often a sign of pulmonary edema during near drowning, and blood, potentially from burst capillaries in the lungs due to extreme strain, spoke to a violent, involuntary battle against submersion. To an experienced officer, a man who had witnessed a grim tableau of death countless times, these seemingly minor discrepancies coalesced into an undeniable contradiction. The most salient detail, the one that screamed defiance to the suicide theory, was the level of water in the bathtub. The thing that got me is the fact that the water was shallow. This observation immediately triggered a deep, innate understanding of human physiology and the powerful, involuntary survival instincts embedded within us all. Your body's not going to let you kill yourself drowning in shallow water. Your body's going to fight. It's not going to let you drown in inches of water. The primal drive to survive, an instinct far more powerful than any conscious would self-destruct, ensures that even in despair, a body will thrash, gasp, and fight against suffocation. To overcome this instinct in shallow water, where escape is physically simple, requires an overwhelming external force or total incapacitation. The collective presence of blood, frothing, and most critically, the shallow water, created a profound and undeniable dissonance with the presented narrative of suicide. The meticulous order of the room, previously supportive of self-harm, now felt deliberately staged, an attempt to hide a truth too ugly for the casual glance. Normally, I probably would not have even called the homicide detectives out, but the fact that there was blood in the water, that there's just inches of water in the tub, I call a homicide. This was not merely a gut feeling. It was a deduction rooted in years of observing the grim realities of violent death, a forensic intuition that recognized the distinct fingerprints of murder disguised as suicide. This experienced officer, challenging the initial wave of opinion and defying the easy answer, drew a clear line in the metaphorical sand. Gail Mosby's death, in professional estimation, was not a suicide. It was homicide. A family's unwavering conviction, the irreverence of maternal love. In the wake of such a discovery, official pronouncements often shape initial perceptions. However, for those who truly knew Gail Mosby, the suggestion of suicide was met with a visceral and immediate rejection, a profound and unshakable disbelief. Her children, still raw with grief, were unwavering in their conviction. They thought that my mom had committed suicide. I never believed that for a second. Joseph's certainty was absolute, rooted in the very core of his being, undiminished by the official reports. For him, and for his brother, the rationale was simple, profound, and universally understood. The unyielding power of a mother's love. My mom valued family the most in life. This was not a passing sentiment for Gail. It was the unwavering compass that guided her existence, the animating force behind her every decision and action. Everything she did in her life was take care of her children. From a perspective of criminal psychology, understanding a victim's core motivations is paramount. A truly suicidal individual, even one deeply depressed, often feels an overwhelming sense of burden, of being an obstacle to the happiness of their loved ones. However, Gail's children consistently attested to her boundless, self-sacrificing love. Her entire life was a testament to their well-being and success. The idea of her voluntarily abandoning them, particularly at such tender ages, was not merely improbable. It was an act utterly irreconcilable with her fundamental character. I knew something happened to her. This sentiment, echoed by her family and closest friends, served as an internal bulwark against the official narrative, an intuitive truth that no amount of circumstantial evidence could dismantle. Their profound grief was now compounded by a gnawing suspicion that Gail's passing was not an act of despair, but an act of malevolent design. The tapestry of a life, Gail Petkovzak, architect of love and success. To truly grasp the fervent rejection of the suicide theory by Gail's loved ones, one must delve into the rich and vibrant tapestry of her life, understanding the woman she was and the values that defined her. Gail Petkovzak was born on September 13, 1952. Amidst the historic charm of Natchez, Mississippi, she was the eldest of 3 daughters, raised in the structured yet loving embrace of a devoutly Catholic home, a foundation that instilled discipline, faith, and a strong sense of community. My grandparents, Frank and Jackie, had 3 daughters, Gail, Lisa, and Jackie. Gail was the eldest. My mom is Lisa. She was the middle child. And then Jackie was the baby. This close-knit family environment, anchored by her dedicated grandparents, instilled within Gail a profound appreciation for effort and integrity. They were a loving household. My grandparents understood that you had to work hard to be able to appreciate the fun things in life. This lesson, imparted early and often, shaped Gail's approach to both her studies and her career. From her formative years, Gail distinguished herself not only by her intelligence, but also by an unwavering dedication to academic excellence. My Aunt Gail, growing up, they always described her as very studious. She was very, very intelligent. These intellectual capacities were not merely innate gifts. They were honed through rigorous discipline and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, culminating in a notable achievement. She graduated as salutatorian of her high school. This academic prowess paved the way for her pursuit of a noble and deeply compassionate career path. When my mom graduated from high school, she went to Northwestern to study to become a nurse. The choice of nursing, a profession demanding both intellectual acuity and profound empathy, speaks volumes about Gail's character. Her post-graduation career flourished, quickly establishing her as a highly respected professional. Post-graduation, she became a very successful NICU nurse, where she took care of the tiniest and most fragile little babies and enjoyed her job immensely. The specialization in neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, nursing is profoundly indicative of Gail's inner strength and nurturing spirit, caring for the most vulnerable of lives, the tiniest and most fragile little babies, requires immense patience, meticulous attention to detail, profound emotional resilience, and an unwavering commitment to preserving and enhancing life. Such a calling, deeply life-affirming and demanding, stands in stark, irreconcilable contrast to the act of self-destruction. The very essence of her professional life was dedicated to safeguarding life, making the notion of her willingly ending her own utterly inconceivable to those who knew her work. By her late 20s, Gail had firmly established her thriving career in Jackson, Mississippi, a testament to her ambition and tireless dedication. With her professional life flourishing, she felt a natural inclination towards building a family of her own, a common and deeply human desire. Her path intersected with Richard Mosby through the convivial mediation of a mutual friend. My mom and dad met when my Aunt Liz, who worked with my mom, introduced them. Richard Mosby, originally from Canton, Mississippi, presented a charming and affable persona. He was referred to as Happy or Smiley. He always had a big smile on his face. His fun-loving and somewhat light-hearted nature seemed, at the time, to perfectly complement Gail's more driven and ambitious temperament. After a relatively brief courtship, characterized by mutual affection and a shared vision of family life, they decided to marry. My parents were married in 1981. Their union soon brought the joyous cacophony of children into their lives. They had my brother Bill in 1982, and then I was born in 1985. To the external world, observing their burgeoning family, they appear to be genuinely content. They appear to be very happy, very much in love. Aunt Gail was happy to finally have found someone. This sense of fulfillment, of having achieved the personal milestone she desired, further countered the emerging narrative of despair. To provide for their growing family, Richard ventured into the entrepreneurial world, establishing a tire business in Hammond, Louisiana. Gail and Richard acquired a home there, seemingly settling into a new life filled with promise and shared aspirations. My first memories of life were growing up in Hammond. My dad was a great dad, and my mom was a great mom. I felt loved by both of them. The early years were imbued with the warmth of familial affection and a sense of domestic stability. However, Richard's entrepreneurial ambition soon encountered unforeseen obstacles. My father had a family tire business in Canton, Mississippi that was fairly successful, and I think my dad wanted to try to duplicate that. The desire to replicate past successes is a powerful motivator, but the market can be unforgiving. But unfortunately, the business failed. The collapse of the tire business delivered a devastating blow, not only financially, but also emotionally. Gail, with her characteristic fortitude and unwavering dedication, continued to work diligently as a nurse, providing the primary income. However, the combined economic burden of supporting 2 young children and covering rent payments proved to be an overwhelming strain on a single salary. Faced with these undeniable financial realities, she and Richard made the arduous decision to relocate back to Jackson, seeking a fresh start and more stable employment. So she and Richard made the difficult decision to move back to Jackson. Upon their return, Richard secured a position, as Gail understood, back with the tire company. However, the financial circumstances had irrevocably shifted. He was not making the money he had made prior. The diminished income and the psychological weight of a failed business venture created an environment ripe with tension and friction. There was a lot of stress. This confluence of economic pressure and emotional strain ultimately fractured the foundations of their once happy marriage. The failure of the tire business and the strain economically that it put on my family ended up leading to them divorcing. Yet, even in the dissolution of their marriage, Gail and Richard demonstrated a commendable maturity, particularly regarding their children's well-being. My parents got divorced in 1986, but they still got along great. I mean, it was a happy family still. It's just that they weren't married. This remarkable post-divorce amicability, prioritizing co-parenting above personal grievances, serve as a testament to their shared commitment to their sons. Following the divorce, my mom had full custody and my dad had every other weekend. They got along better post-divorce then. They did when they were married. They were very amicable. Such a healthy and functional co-parenting relationship, rare in many divorces, illustrated Gail's enduring dedication to creating a stable environment for her children, even in the face of personal heartache. 2 years subsequent to their divorce, Richard remarried. Gail, however, consciously chose a different path, remaining single and fully committed herself to the demands and joys of motherhood. For her, motherhood was not merely a role, it was an all-encompassing identity, a profound life purpose that superseded any personal romantic aspirations. For her, motherhood came before everything else. Her children's success and happiness were her most cherished ambitions. My mom's greatest aspiration was to be able to see me and my brother successful and grow up to be the best we could be. Her innate patience, honed in the demanding environment of the NICU, extended effortlessly to her own sons. I don't know how my mother could be as patient as she was with me. This boundless capacity for love, understanding, and unwavering support was a hallmark of her parenting, a defining characteristic recognized by her children. That's what made my mother such a great mother, is how much I sensed that she cared about me. Gail's life, when viewed in its totality, was a compelling narrative of ambition, resilience, deep human connection, and an overwhelming, selfless dedication to her children, attributes that made the notion of her willingly committing suicide an act utterly inconsistent with the very fabric of her being, a betrayal of everything she stood for and cherished. The journal's confession, a glimmer of personal turmoil, a veil of secrecy. 6 arduous years had passed since Gail assumed the challenging mantle of a single mother, years devoted unreservedly to nurturing her sons and meticulously constructing a stable, loving home for them. Now, she was discovered dead in her bathtub, presented initially as an apparent suicide. The presence of her journal at the scene offered what many interpreted as a potential, albeit tragic, explanation for such an unimaginable act. Her journal found at the scene offers a potential reason for why she would end her own life. Within its intimate pages, Gail's private thoughts revealed a period of significant emotional distress, a vulnerability often associated with profound personal crises. She had been having some problems with depression at the time. The entry spoke candidly of a recent, profoundly painful breakup. It describes a very unhappy breakup with a woman she had been having an apparently pretty, long-term relationship with. This revelation regarding Gail's personal life, particularly the nature of her romantic relationship, came as a shock to her children, hinting at a facet of her emotional world she had largely kept private. I never really knew that they were dating at the time, my mom and her girlfriend, but I still remember my mom on the couch after they had broken up, crying and just being very, very affected by this breakup. The raw, palpable grief expressed in the journal, and the vivid memory recalled by her son, painted a picture of deep heartache, a profound emotional wound that could indeed contribute to a depressive state. To properly analyze this element, it is crucial for a criminal psychology analyst to contextualize Gail's experiences within the prevailing social landscape of the time. In Mississippi in the early 90s, having a homosexual relationship would have been a very troubling thing to do in terms of societal acceptance. The deeply conservative ethos prevalent in Mississippi during that era imposed immense social pressures and significant stigmas on individuals involved in same-sex relationships. That would cause someone to have a hard time expressing their heartache. The weight of societal disapproval, coupled with deeply ingrained cultural norms, often forces individuals into a state of emotional isolation, preventing them from openly sharing and processing their pain without fear of judgment, ostracism, or discrimination. Mississippi is still a conservative state, and there still is a stigma among certain people, and the climate at that time or relationship would have been defined a lot differently. This enforced secrecy and lack of social support for her emotional struggles could certainly exacerbate feelings of depression and despair, potentially making an individual feel more vulnerable and isolated in their suffering. Such emotional suppression is a well-documented factor in deepening depressive episodes. However, even with this deeply personal and potentially influential motive, a broken heart compounded by significant societal pressures, not everyone at the scene that fateful day is convinced that Gail Mosby chose to end her life. There's just something amiss, and it's that old police gut feeling that something was wrong. Everything was just too damn neat. It almost looks staged. There's something we're missing here, and I can't put my finger on it. Coming up, investigators hear about a personal grudge. She was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. She did not like her. And an informant agrees to wear a wire. It does establish that they were in the house when Gail died, and they weren't there for honorable purposes. On the night of May 24th, 1992, with several questions lingering about single mother Gail Mosby's apparent suicide, Jackson police sent homicide detective Al Adu to the scene. He was a great detective, and he paid attention to detail. He immediately started working as a murderer. There was a possibility that maybe she took some meds and just had a bad reaction. But, you got to explore all possibilities. There was absolutely nothing that would indicate anything was wrong other than there was a dead woman in the bathtub. He and I both just knew there was just something we were missing, but we didn't know what it was, and he was going to find it. He looked around a lot and did not see anything turn over, no indication anybody had tried to break in a window or the door. But he did happen to notice that there was a framed picture. The glass was cracked. The more I looked at it, the more I got suspicious of it, and so was the lead detective. He and we just said there's something wrong. Investigators looked to the coroner to confirm their suspicions. The crime scene's mine. The homicide case is a homicide detective's, but the body belongs to the coroner. As part of his duty, he pronounced her deceased and, looked at the scene, and there was nothing to indicate foul play. There was a small abrasion on her nose, but nothing that indicated that anybody had beaten her into an unconscious state and put her in the bathtub. The coroner rules Gail's death accidental. I said, "Really? Can you really drown in this bathtub?" And his word was to me exactly this. He said, "You can if I say you can." And I knew then, okay, this is where it's going to go. He and I got along up until this point. All the years we worked together. But I thought it was a bad judgment call on his part. And he wasn't willing to look at any other options. And for some reason, he dug his heels on this particular case due to the fact that the lead and I both felt that there was something wrong. We put on our offense, report there was a death pending, and that left the door open for us for further investigation. For now, their next step is informing Gail's immediate family of her death by apparent suicide. Ex-husband Richard is left the grim task of delivering the news to their children. He said, "Look, we got to tell you something. Your mom's dead." And I said, "You're joking." Well, then my dad started crying, and then I knew, and I collapsed, and I'll never remember getting up. Even at that age, I understood what suicide was. So to have someone tell me that my mom committed suicide was just the most absurd thing that I could think of as investigators contact more of Gail's family about the circumstances of her death. Her loved ones say it's more likely someone did this to her. 2 weeks prior to her death, Aunt Gail called my mom and was worried that something was going to happen. And she said she didn't feel safe. My mom, as a sister, would do. I tried to reassure her, I'm sure everything's going to be fine. But my mom had to go, so she cut the conversation short. And unfortunately, that was the last time she spoke with her. Her sister suspects Gail's concerns had something to do with Richard and his new wife, Deborah. She says tension has been growing between them since Deborah and Richard got married 4 years ago. After the divorce, Aunt Gail and Uncle Richard, they were very amicable, co-parented very well. After Debbie came into the picture, the parenting dynamic changed a little bit. Debbie was married before she met my dad. She had 2 children. One of them did not survive infancy. And after my dad and Debbie got married, they had a daughter, Sarah. Debbie treated my brother, and I tremendously different than the way she treated Sarah. Debbie and my father's relationship sort of made us a little bit more secondary. It was now this third party that controlled what we were going to be doing. All of a sudden, my mom and my dad, they started having custody battles. They're in and out of court. There's alimony disputes. And it was clear that Debbie was the one spearheading those problems. Gail's family tells police that Deborah resented any reminders of Richard's life before her. She didn't even like the fact that my Aunt Gail didn't change her last name post-divorce. Aunt Gail simply stated it was because that was her boy's last name. But I know it very much was a problem for Debbie. There couldn't be a more striking difference living with my dad and Debbie versus living with my mom. My mom was loving. Living with my dad and Debbie, it was like a complete absence of love. Debbie was very nasty towards my Aunt Gail. It was very evident that she did not like her. Her utilities been cut off. She had no proof who it was. But we all assumed, Gail and me in the police department, that it was coming from Debbie. And investigators learned the situation had been a contributing factor to Gail's recent breakup. Whatever relationship that Gail had with the woman, that ended because of all the drama that was involved in it. But without evidence to support the idea of murder, there is little investigators can do. In the absence of some information that indicated death by another identifiable person, there just wasn't anywhere to go with it. And so, nothing really happened until the fall. In September, a woman who we now know as Vicky Mordecai went to the office of the FBI on a Sunday afternoon. And she was terrified, and what she said changed the investigation. For months after the death of Gail Mosby, a woman approaches the FBI seeking protection in exchange for information about the case. What Vicky Mordecai tells this FBI agent was that she and her husband, a guy named Ricky Mordecai, were in the business of raising marijuana up in northeast Mississippi, and an entire crop had disappeared. They were in business with her stepfather, Roy Kyle. Roy Kyle was accusing them of having stolen the crop. She told them that her stepfather, she felt, was going to hire a hitman to kill her and her husband, and that she was terrified because she knew that he had hired a hitman to kill someone else. Previously, a woman in Jackson, Gail Mosby, she began to describe the scenario, this woman in the bathtub. They went over to this woman's house and, killed her. She said, in the course of it, something glass got broken. He looks at this set of circumstances and says, well, I don't know. This is a little too crazy. But he called the Jackson Police Department Homicide and Robbery Division. When Jackson homicide detectives hear about the broken glass, they immediately know Vicky is telling the truth because that detail was never made public. So the detective said, I want to talk to her. So she came over there and, told him the story, and he says, from whom did you get this information? She told him that she had heard this from her sister, Debbie Mosby. According to Vicky, her and Debbie's stepfather, Roy Kyle, was only the middle man. Deborah said, I need somebody to take care of Gail. Can you help me with it? He said, well, yeah, I know somebody who might can help you. What Vicky says that Deborah Mosby told her was that Billy Ray Ford, this hit man, had come over to their home. They lived in Canton, picked up her husband, Richard Mosby, and they drove over to Gail's house. There was no sign of any forced entry because Gail thought she was only letting Richard in. And she didn't know Billy Ray was hiding behind the door. Vicky says once the door was open, Billy Ray attacked Gail. And in the ensuing struggle, the picture frame shattered. The murderer had covered her mouth and nose with a rag, soaked with something until she was unconscious, and then he had taken her to the bathtub, poured the water until it got high enough and it drowned her. When investigators run a background check on the alleged hitman, Billy Ray Ford, they find a history of violence, including a past conviction for the attempted murder of the sheriff in Warren County, Mississippi. It was reversed on appeal, so that was not a viable conviction to use against him. But, he was a known criminal element out there. Detectives put out a BOLO on Ford and turned their attention to Deborah Mosby. We knew she was harassing Gail to the point of utter absurdity just to get her to back off, collecting the child support that she was certainly entitled to. Deborah's history with Gail adds credence to Vicky's allegations and gives Jackson police enough to open an official investigation. We believe at that point that Gail did not commit suicide. That did not happen, so we got to do something about this. Coming up, a history of tragedies raises even more questions. Couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about two people who drowned in a bathtub? It sure is unusual, and investigators face a political battle to prove their case. She was buried without an autopsy, so we get an order to have Gail's body exhumed. Richard and Deborah Mosby have emerged as the primary suspects in his ex-wife's murder. But for now, the only evidence detectives have comes from a confessed marijuana farmer. With more direct evidence needed, detectives ask both Ricky and Vicky Mordecai to wear a wire. Ricky and Vicky get wired up. They go up to Richard and Deborah's house. Ricky and Vicky are still thinking that Billy Ray Ford has a contract to kill them. So they go there to talk to Deborah and Richard about how terrified they are, and can Deborah intervene and keep this pit man from coming to kill them, just as he did Gail. With investigators listening in, Deborah admits knowing Billy Ray, but denies hiring him to kill anyone. What Deborah was talking about was not that she hired him to murder her. She hired him to go over there and scare her or rough her up or, just make her go away. The language is not the smoking gun we want, but it's helpful. It does in fact establish that Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were in the house when Gail died. After the sting operation, police subpoenaed Deborah's phone records. About a month prior to Gail's death, one night Deborah Mosby calls her stepfather, who happens to have connections with a hitman. Roy calls Billy Ray Ford, who in turn calls Deborah, and then Deborah calls him back. To our knowledge, Deborah had never known Billy Ray Ford before she was put in touch with him by Roy Carr. Call logs show that in the month leading up to Gail's death, Deborah and Billy Ray spoke several times. These people don't know each other from Adam's house, but they're having all these conversations. It looked pretty bad, smelled pretty bad, but did we really have it? Not so sure. So we indicted them for conspiracy to commit murder. Authorities arrest Richard, Deborah, and Billy Ray without incident. The bizarre murder plot captures headlines throughout the region. My father and Debbie, they were trying to tell us that it was my grandparents and my aunts, and they were out to get us. There's no truth to it. Whenever I found out that Debbie was also arrested, my initial thoughts were, this sort of makes sense. I didn't think that my dad would have done something like that. That wasn't who he was. News of the arrest also reaches someone from Deborah's past. Deborah's ex-husband, who's a guy named Mike McLean. He contacted me and told me some just horrendous things about her. Mike tells authorities about a tragedy that occurred in May 1988 before his divorce from Deborah. They had a child named Angel, and Angel was wheelchair-bound. And then they had another small child. Mike told me that the wheelchair-bound child was supposed to be watching the child in the bathtub, and the child drowned. Mike said that Deborah tried to blame the wheelchair-bound child for the negligence that caused that child to die. Prosecutors can't ignore the similarities between the two incidents. You couldn't get past the idea that we're talking about two people who drowned in a bathtub. It just kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? Nobody ever could prove anything about that. But it sure is unusual. Even with this new suspicious discovery, prosecutors aren't sure there's enough to get a conviction. What you have to have in order to convict someone is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We weren't there yet. The DA's office continues to build its case, but their urgency increases when Richard and Deborah are released on bail. They had custody of the little boy. I've never known that to happen. Richard being the natural father, they went to live with Richard and Debbie, completely believing that Debbie had killed my mom. Now I'm living with her. I know that my life's probably in danger, too. Nearly 8 months after Gail Mosby was found dead in her bathtub, the two prime suspects in her murder, her ex-husband Richard and his new wife Deborah, have been released on bail. They've also retained custody of Gail and Richard's 2 sons, Joe and Bill. My grandparents knew that Bill and Joe were being mistreated when they were in Richard and Deb's care, and they were doing everything they could to get custody of them. Gail's parents ultimately prevail in the custody battle. We moved to Baton Rouge and started to live with my grandparents, which was just life-changing because now it's the first time that we've had some sense of normalcy. since my mom was killed. The prosecution, however, is still facing a major roadblock. Despite the evidence collected, the county coroner will not reverse his ruling that Gail's death was a suicide. We knew that the cause of death was drowning, but we didn't have conclusive proof that the manner of death was homicide. She was buried without an autopsy. One of the next things that we did was to get an order to have Gail's body exhumed and do an autopsy. One thing that we wanted to know was whether or not we could prove that she had chloroform in her system, but that was not successful. We couldn't prove or disprove that because the body was too decomposed. The only way we were going to get this case is to call an outside pathologist. My office hired Dr. Michael Biden, who was a premier forensic pathologist in the country. I tell him this whole story, and it was like he knew exactly where I needed to go. He said, "Go get your autopsy pictures." And so I did. And immediately, he just zones in on this little bruise on her ankle. He knew exactly what had happened, but he said, once you're unconscious, then you're not struggling anymore. They could take her unconscious body and pick her up by her ankles, place her in a body of water, and all they had to do was to get the water level over her nose. Dr. Biden noticed abrasions on her nose, which is consistent with a rough cloth like a towel being held over her nose. It was used to make her unconscious. Dr. Biden said, "This is not suicide. This is not an accident. This is a homicide." He made the same statement I did. You can't commit suicide in shallow water. It didn't change the coroner's mind. He took the position that it was still a suicide and continued to do that. He took the position that he was a coroner and that was the gospel, and there was no getting around it. To me, the victim was way more important than his ego. Prosecutors hope that Dr. Biden's expert opinion will be enough to convince a jury. On October 10th, 1994, the joint trial of Deborah Mosby, Richard Mosby, and Billy Ray Ford begins. Tommy and I decided that we would try the conspiracy to commit capital murder first. As the state lays out its evidence for conspiracy charges, one of the defendants decides to turn against the others. It's not looking good to Billy Ray. So his lawyer comes over to the counsel table and says, "My client wants a deal, and he will agree to testify against Richard and Debbie, which is golden." Ford's statement settles once and for all who the mastermind behind the murder really was. He actually dealt with Deborah, who retained him, and she was the one he was talking to. Richard apparently pretty much did what Deborah told him to do. It's the break prosecutors have been looking for. Now, they just have to convince a jury. This was a case that had a lot of moving parts. The state never knows if there's going to be one person who just doesn't believe they proved their case. With Billy Ray Ford agreeing to testify against Deborah and Richard Mosby, the couple's cases are severed. They will be tried separately for capital murder. In May 1995, the proceedings against Richard began. Richard decided to plead guilty to murder. So, of course, the death penalty was off the table at that point. It was a confusing time emotionally, because as hateful and as angry as I was, the sense of relief was just overbearing. It was very important to know that he pleaded guilty. Prosecutors then turned their attention to the woman they believe orchestrated the crime. The mastermind is Deborah Mosby, and we know her to be, however you define it, evil. Debbie was the catalyst of this whole thing. Deborah's trial begins in December 1995, 3 years after Gail's murder. The prosecution's star witnesses are the confessed hitman and a nationally acclaimed pathologist. You can't discredit Dr. Biden. You can't do it. He's too good. He put the case together for us. Deborah refuses to take the stand in her own defense, leaving state prosecutors to speculate on motive. If Gail died, then child support would stop, and that Social Security would start for the boys, which I believe at that time was going to be $1, $300 a month. My impression was that she just didn't like Gail Mosby. In fact, I think she hated her, and she just decided that her life would be better without her, and it was worth having her killed. The jury convicts Deborah on all charges, but becomes deadlocked on recommending the death penalty. Instead, she receives a life sentence. It was a final nail in the coffin in the sense of, wow, she's where she belongs. She's in prison, and now she can't hurt anybody else. In 2007, Billy Ray Ford and Richard Mosby were released from prison. In 2021, Deborah was released as well after serving 26 years of her sentence. One thing I learned from Debbie's conviction and from my dad's sentencing is that life in jail doesn't mean life in jail. It's a huge gut punch knowing that they're out of prison. But I'll say this based on how my grandparents raised us. It's made the anger that we had towards them. It's made it small because what we have, it's way more important. What keeps my mom alive to me today is the relationship that I have with my brother because she really instilled in us a sense of family, and we never let that go. I like to remind my own boys that I was a product of one of the greatest mothers this world could have ever had. So I want them to be able to understand that even though she's not around, she's still all with them. The deceptive tranquility of Sunday afternoon, May 24th, 1992 in Jackson, Mississippi, veiled a horror about to be unveiled. A simple family arrangement, the routine return of two young boys to their mother's care, would unexpectedly plunge into a labyrinthine narrative of death, deceit, and a chilling vendetta that threatened to consume even more lives. What first appeared as a personal tragedy, an apparent suicide shrouded in melancholic silence and reinforced by superficial observations, was, in fact, the meticulously calculated execution of a vibrant life, carefully masked by those who orchestrated it with a cold, unforgiving hand. As a criminal psychology analyst and a seasoned detective novelist, I find such cases particularly compelling. They lay bare the intricate workings of the human mind, showcasing both its profound capacity for insidious evil and its equally remarkable ability to relentlessly pursue and uncover the truth, no matter how deeply buried. The unanswered door, a mother's absence and a child's intuition shattered. The afternoon sun, warm and typical for late spring in the southern heartland, cast long, elongated shadows across the quiet residential streets of Jackson. Richard Mosby, accompanied by his new wife, Deborah, was fulfilling what should have been a routine, unremarkable obligation, dropping off his two young sons, 7-year-old Joseph and 9-year-old Bill, at the home of their mother, Gail Mosby. The boys had spent a pleasant weekend under their father and stepmother's care, a common arrangement following Gail and Richard's divorce. The established schedule dictated their return to their mother precisely at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Yet, as the vehicle idled outside the familiar dwelling, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of unease began to ripple through the seemingly normal Sunday, an invisible foreboding that would soon crystallize in profound dread. Joseph, still perceiving the world through the relatively unclouded, trusting lens of childhood innocence, recounted the unsettling prelude to what should have been a joyous reunion with his beloved mother. We knocked on the door, and my mom didn't answer. This deviation from Gail's predictable and punctual nature was immediately striking, an initial crack in the familiar patterns of their lives. A further disquiet manifested itself in an unexpected physical barrier, a detail that resonated deeply with the boys' nascent sense of wrongness. Doors locked, and it never locked. This small, seemingly inconsequential detail, a door that Gail habitually left unlocked, immediately registered as an anomaly, a breach of her established routine. Gail, known for her meticulousness and order, rarely varied from her household habits. Joseph's young mind, naturally resistant to processing anything profoundly sinister, struggled valiantly to reconcile these conflicting realities. I was trying to figure out what's going on, because my mom's car's right there. The unmistakable presence of Gail's vehicle in the driveway, a tangible indicator of her immediate proximity, only deepened perplexing mystery, suggesting she was home yet unresponsive. I'm so young, I'm not thinking any things. You don't go there when you're that age. His undeveloped understanding of the world's darker, more brutal corners temporarily shielded him from true, terrifying implications of the silence. However, the slightly older and more intuitive Bill, with his additional 2 years of life experience, sensed a deeper, more ominous undercurrent, a premonition that transcended mere worry. But I got the sense that Bill understood something was wrong. The unspoken anxieties conveyed by an older child, grappling with nascent fears that outstrip his ability to articulate them, often speak volumes more powerfully than any uttered words. Their shared unspoken sense of foreboding settled like a cold stone in their young hearts. Richard's wife, Deborah, perhaps attempting to project an air of normalcy or, more sinisterly, feigning a benign disinterest in the face of the growing anomaly, scribbled a note and conspicuously left it on Gail's car. This act, seemingly conventional, a message communicating their presence and departure, would later be scrutinized for a performative nature. Before departing, they extended a seemingly casual request to the next-door neighbor, a kindly man intimately familiar with the gentle rhythms and neighborly customs of their quiet, residential street. They asked him to call if Gail made contact. However, as the clock inexorably ticked past 6 o'clock, the neighbor's initial compliance, his promise to relay a message, transformed into a palpable and deeply rooted concern. He knew Gail Mosby well. He understood her character, her unwavering commitment to her children, and her steadfast reliability. The neighbor was concerned because Gail was very responsible. There was some reason why she would not be there. His conviction was not based on idle speculation or unfounded worry. It was rooted in years of observing Gail's impeccable, consistent character, a profound sense of unease, a premonition that transcended mere everyday worry, prompted him to act decisively. Equipped with a spare key, a practical relic of mutual trust and camaraderie that once characterized their friendly neighborhood, he unlocked Gail's front door and tentatively stepped into the unsettling stillness of her home, his heart undoubtedly pounding with a potent mixture of apprehension and the desperate hope that he would simply find her absent, perhaps running a last-minute errand. The interior of the house, upon his initial cautious inspection, presented a meticulously deceptive tableau of peace and undisturbed order. Everything seemed orderly in the house, which was consistent with the way she did things. She was apparently a neat housekeeper, but everything appeared to be in order. This detail, which would later be surgically dissected by trained investigative minds, would eventually be reinterpreted not as innocuous evidence of serene domesticity, but as a chilling, deliberate signature of absolute control, a carefully constructed illusion intended to mislead and conceal. Yet, this fragile facade of perfect normalcy was about to shatter with violent suddenness, revealing the brutal truth concealed beneath its pristine surface. The neighbor's anxious, deepening search inevitably led him down a short hallway and into the main bathroom, where the illusion of order disintegrated into an unspeakable, horrifying scene. He was horrified to find that she was in her bathtub, and Gail Mosby was dead. The stark reality of the discovery, confronting him with visceral brutality, painted a grim, chilling picture that would haunt his memory. She was unclothed. Her body was in the bathtub, with her feet hanging outside the bathtub. Her head was still underwater. The scene, on its superficial surface, seemed to speak only of drowning, a death both tragic and profoundly solitary, perhaps even self-inflicted. She died from drowning. The initial, emotionally charged and often superficial assessment, made in the first moments of shock, left little room for other immediate interpretations. Steering minds toward a singular, sorrowful conclusion, there was no other explanation for it. In these fraught, initial moments, before forensic examination and logical deduction can truly begin, such an instinctive categorization of the incomprehensible is common, a deeply human attempt to categorize and contain unbearable reality. However, it is precisely in these initial, permeable moments that the crucial seeds of doubt are sometimes inadvertently sown, particularly for those with trained eyes and an innate, almost subconscious, understanding of patterns of human suffering and malice. Gail's distraught neighbor, reeling from the traumatic and horrifying sight, immediately dialed 911, initiating the official cascade of emergency services, uniformed police officers, paramedics, and eventually the grim, methodical machinery of a formal criminal investigation. The clock had now begun to tick on a case far more complex than simple tragedy. First impressions, the allure of simplicity versus the whisper of doubt, discerning the lies. The rapid arrival of police officers and paramedics at Gail Mosby's residence, mere minutes after the frantic 911 call, introduced a structured, albeit somber and clinical, assessment to the unfolding tragedy. As a standard protocol in any unexplained death, law enforcement officers immediately began to scrutinize the immediate environment, systematically searching for any overt telltale signs that might contradict the apparent simplicity of the drowning scenario. When the police arrived, they noticed no sign of a struggle. They didn't see anything being disturbed. The absence of overturned furniture, scuffled rugs, broken items in the living areas, or any evidence of forced entry lent considerable initial weight to the preliminary assumption of a self-inflicted death. This apparent lack of violent chaos, paradoxically, created an atmosphere of unsettling calm, suggesting an absence of a perpetrator. Adding to this impression, investigators discovered Gail's clothing meticulously arranged, a detail that initially seemed to fit the emerging narrative perfectly. They found her clothes had been folded and left by the bathtub. Such an act, often associated with individuals who make deliberate preparations for their final moments, typically contributes to a narrative of calculated self-harm, imbuing the scene with a grim sense of personal control over one's end. Further corroboration for the initial suicide theory appeared in the poignant form of Gail's private journal. They also found a journal. Its intimate pages offered a raw, vulnerable window into a mind grappling with inner turmoil, revealing a personal struggle that could, superficially, explain an act of despair. She had been having some problems with depression. The stark vulnerability and emotional pain expressed within its entries provided a potential, if heartbreaking, motive for an individual contemplating ending their own life. Fitting the psychological profile of a suicidal individual experiencing profound heartache, this introspective, psychological evidence was augmented by tangible indicators of professional medical intervention and treatment. Also, they did find some prescriptions. I can't specifically recall what they were, but the kinds of things you would expect somebody who had been depressed to have been prescribed. The discovery of prescribed antidepressants or anxiolytics, medications indicative of a professionally diagnosed and treated depressive condition, further reinforced the developing narrative, connecting Gail's reported mental state to the scene. You put that package together, that kind of tips you over towards suicide. From a superficial or even a clinically detached perspective, all the observable pieces seem to fit neatly, aligning to form a cohesive, albeit tragic, picture of a life voluntarily ended by profound personal suffering. However, a fundamental and inviolable principle of robust criminal investigation mandates a thorough, unbiased, and relentlessly skeptical evaluation before any definitive conclusion can be pronounced. Even as the tide of initial opinion swayed strongly toward suicide, the seasoned professionals on scene were bound by their training and experience to probe deeper, to challenge every assumption, and to critically examine every seemingly perfect piece of the puzzle. It was during this critical and meticulously observed phase that the fragile consensus began to visibly splinter, revealing a profound and undeniable dissonance. Thanks to the discerning and expert observations of a veteran patrol officer. That evening, I was just on active patrol, and I got the call of a deceased subject at that location. The officer, approaching the scene with professional detachment honed over years, initially cataloged the absence of overt indicators of foul play, largely aligning with the general impression of a peaceful, if tragic, death. There was no signs of any disturbance, any foul play. Yet, certain seemingly minor, almost subliminal details registered as anomalous, gnawing at his veteran intuition with insistent unease. I did notice that one of her legs had a small bruise on the inside of her left ankle. A bruise, while superficially minor and easily dismissible, was fundamentally out of place in a context of peaceful, self-orchestrated drowning, subtly suggesting an unobserved struggle or manipulation of the body. More disturbing and directly contradictory were the specific observations related to the immediate cause of death itself, the grim final moments of Gail's life. I could tell there was frothing from the mouth, and there was a small amount of blood in the water, which would indicate the lungs were struggling for air. This was emphatically not the placid, passive surrender implied by a self-chosen, deliberate drowning. It was the agonizing, undeniable evidence of a desperate, violent struggle for breath, a body's primal and involuntary refusal to succumb to suffocation. The simultaneous presence of both froth, often a sign of severe pulmonary edema indicative of acute, struggle during near drowning, and a small amount of blood, potentially originating from burst capillaries in the lungs due to extreme, involuntary strain, spoke eloquently to a brutal, involuntary battle against submersion. Such biological responses betray a living, fighting entity, not a passive victim of self-destruction. To an experienced officer, a man who had witnessed a grim tableau of violent death countless times throughout his career, these seemingly minor discrepancies, the bruise, the frothing, the blood, coalesce into an undeniable and profound contradiction to the suicide narrative. The most salient, the most irrefutable detail, the one that screamed defiance to the suicide theory with unwavering physiological certainty, was the shockingly low level of water in the bathtub. The thing that got me is the fact that the water was shallow. This pivotal observation immediately triggered a deeply ingrained professional instinct, an innate understanding of fundamental human physiology and the powerful, involuntary survival instincts deeply embedded within us all. Your body's not going to let you kill yourself drowning in shallow water. Your body's going to fight. It's not going to let you drown in inches of water. The primal, evolutionary drive to survive, an instinct infinitely more powerful than any conscious, momentary will to self-destruct, ensures that even in profound despair, a human body will instinctively thrash, gasp, and violently fight against suffocation, especially when escape is physically simple and immediately available in such shallow depths. To overcome this overwhelming instinct in such minimal water, where escape is effortless, necessitates an overwhelming external force or total, absolute incapacitation. The collective presence of the blood, the frothing, and most critically, the utterly insufficient level of water in the tub created a profound, unshakable dissonance with the presented narrative of suicide. The meticulous order of the room, initially supportive of a deliberate, planned self-harm, now began to feel artificially pristine, deliberately staged, an almost mocking attempt to hide a brutal truth, too ugly for the casual glance. It spoke of calculated malevolence, not despair. Normally, I probably would not have even called the homicide detectives out, but the fact that there was blood in the water, that there's just inches of water in the tub, I call a homicide. This definitive declaration was not merely a subjective gut feeling. It was professional deduction rooted in decades of observing the grim realities of violent death, a finely honed forensic intuition that unerringly recognized the distinct, immutable fingerprints of murder cunningly disguised as suicide. This experienced officer, courageously challenging the powerful initial wave of opinion and boldly defying the easy, convenient answer, drew a clear and morally unequivocal line in the metaphorical sand. Gail Mosby's death, in his professional and expert estimation, was not a suicide. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, homicide, His insistence would prove to be the critical, first turning point in a long journey toward truth. A family's unwavering conviction, the irreverence of maternal love and life's purpose. In the immediate wake of such a shocking discovery, amplified by official pronouncements and media speculation, initial perceptions often solidify quickly. However, for those who intimately and truly knew Gail Mosby, the burgeoning suggestion of suicide was met with a visceral, immediate, and profound rejection, a deeply ingrained and unshakable disbelief. Her children, still raw with the fresh wound of grief, were unwavering and resolute in their conviction. They thought that my mom had committed suicide. I never believed that for a second. Joe's certainty, a deep-seated truth in his young heart, was absolute, undiminished by the weight of any official reports or pronouncements. For him, and for his older brother, Bill, the underlying rationale was profoundly simple, universally understood, and fundamentally human: the unyielding, selfless power of a mother's unconditional love. My mom valued family the most in life. This was not a passing sentiment for Gail. It was the unwavering moral compass that unerringly guided her entire existence, the animating force behind her every decision, every sacrifice, and every conscious action. Everything she did in her life was take care of her children. Her children were her purpose, her joy, her reason for living. From the rigorous perspective of criminal psychology, understanding a victim's core motivations and intrinsic psychological makeup is paramount. A truly suicidal individual, even one in the throes of profound clinical depression, often grapples with an overwhelming and suffocating sense of being a burden, of being an insurmountable obstacle to the happiness and well-being of their loved ones. However, Gail's children consistently attested, with heart-wrenching certainty, to her boundless, utterly self-sacrificing love. Her entire adult life, every conscious choice, every arduous day, was an eloquent testament to their well-being, their growth, and their ultimate success. The very idea of her voluntarily abandoning them, particularly at such tender, vulnerable ages, was not merely improbable in their minds. It was an act utterly irreconcilable, a grotesque psychological contradiction to her fundamental character, her very essence as a mother. I knew something happened to her. This powerful sentiment, passionately echoed by her close family and dearest friends, served as an unshakable internal bulwark against the tide of the official suicide narrative, an intuitive, deeply felt truth that no amount of superficial circumstantial evidence could possibly dismantle. Their profound grief was now irrevocably compounded by a gnawing, agonizing suspicion that Gail's passing was not an act of internal despair, but a malevolent act of external design, cold-blooded and intentional. They would not rest until this truth was illuminated. The tapestry of life, Gail Peckovzak, architect of love, ambition, and resilience. To truly grasp the fervent and absolute rejection of the suicide theory by Gail's loved ones, one must first meticulously delve into the rich and vibrant tapestry of her life, understanding the remarkable woman she was and the core values that inextricably defined her. Gail Peckovzak was born on September 13th, 1952, amidst the charming, historically rich landscapes of Natchez, Mississippi. She was the eldest of 3 daughters, raised within the structured yet profoundly loving embrace of a devoutly Catholic home, a foundational environment that instilled within her deeply cherished virtues of discipline, unwavering faith, unwavering commitment, and a strong, inherent sense of community. My grandparents, Frank and Jackie, had 3 daughters, Gail, Lisa, and Jackie. Gail was the eldest. My mom is Lisa. She was the middle child, and then Jackie was the baby. This close-knit family environment, anchored firmly by her dedicated grandparents, meticulously instilled within Gail a profound, lifelong appreciation for hard work, unwavering effort, moral integrity, and the joy derived from earned rewards. They were a loving household. My grandparents understood that you had to work hard to be able to appreciate the fun things in life. This fundamental lesson, imparted early and reinforced often, profoundly shaped Gail's approach to both her rigorous studies and her chosen professional career, infusing them with purpose and diligence. From her formative early years, Gail distinguished herself not merely by her innate intelligence, but, more importantly, by an unwavering, almost fierce dedication to academic excellence and intellectual pursuit. My Aunt Gail, growing up, they always described her as very studious. She was very, very intelligent. These formidable intellectual capacities were not simply uncultivated innate gifts. They were meticulously honed through rigorous discipline, tireless study, and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, culminating in a notable academic achievement that foreshadowed her future successes. She graduated as salutatorian of her high school. This remarkable academic prowess served as a powerful stepping stone, meticulously paving the way for her pursuit a noble, deeply compassionate, and profoundly demanding career path. When my mom graduated from high school, she went to Northwestern to study to become a nurse. The intentional choice of nursing, a profession that intrinsically demands both acute intellectual acuity, meticulous attention to detail, and profound, boundless empathy, speaks volumes about the very core of Gail's character and her innate desire to care for others. Her post-graduation career flourished with remarkable speed and success, quickly establishing her as a highly respected and immensely capable professional within the challenging medical field. Post-graduation, she became a very successful NICU nurse, where she took care of the tiniest and most fragile little babies and enjoyed her job immensely. The specialization in neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, nursing is profoundly indicative of Gail's inner strength, her remarkable capacity for empathy, and her unwavering nurturing spirit. Caring for the most vulnerable of human lives, the tiniest and most fragile little babies, demands immense, almost saint-like patience, an almost obsessive, meticulous attention to the minutest detail, profound emotional resilience in the face of constant life and death struggles, and an unwavering, fierce commitment to preserving and enhancing life at its most nascent stages. Such a demanding calling, so fundamentally life-affirming and relentlessly dedicated to protecting fragile existence, stands in stark, irreconcilable, and utter contradiction to the very idea of self-destruction. The entire essence of her professional life was dedicated, unequivocally, to safeguarding and fighting for life, making the notion of her willingly ending her own life utterly inconceivable and utterly absurd to everyone who intimately knew her work and her passion. By her late 20s, Gail had firmly established her thriving professional career in the bustling city of Jackson, Mississippi, a testament to her inherent ambition, relentless dedication, and exceptional capabilities. With her professional life flourishing, she felt a natural and deeply human inclination towards building a family of her own, a common and universally cherished desire. Her path serendipitously intersected with Richard Mosby through convivial mediation of a mutual friend, Aunt Liz, who also worked with Gail. My mom and dad met when my Aunt Liz, who worked with my mom, introduced them. Richard Mosby, originally hailing from Canton, Mississippi, presented a charming, approachable, and seemingly affable persona. He was referred to as Happy or Smiley. He always had a big smile on his face. His fun-loving, somewhat light-hearted, and generally easygoing nature seemed, at the time, to perfectly complement Gail's more driven, ambitious, and meticulously organized temperament. After a relatively brief courtship, characterized by evident mutual affection and a shared vision of a harmonious family life, they decided to marry, committing to building a future together. My parents were married in 1981. Their loving union soon brought the joyous, often cacophonous, sound of children into their lives, expanding their family and their happiness. They had my brother Bill in 1982, and then I was born in 1985. To the external world, observing their burgeoning family unit, they appear to be genuinely content, deeply happy, and profoundly in love, a couple achieving the quintessential American dream. They appear to be very happy, very much in love. Aunt Gail was happy to finally have found someone. This pervasive sense of fulfillment, of having meticulously achieved the personal and professional milestones she had desired, further powerfully countered the emerging dark narrative of internal despair and self-destruction. To provide for their rapidly growing family, Richard embarked on an entrepreneurial venture, establishing his own tire business in the vibrant city of Hammond, Louisiana. He and Gail subsequently acquired a house there, seemingly settling comfortably into a promising new life filled with shared aspirations, domestic bliss, and the bustling energy of young children. My first memories of life were growing up in Hammond. My dad was a great dad, and my mom was a great mom. I felt loved by both of them. These idyllic early years were imbued with the warmth of familial affection and a reassuring sense of domestic stability, painting a picture-happy, carefree childhood. However, Richard's entrepreneurial ambition, unfortunately, soon encountered unforeseen and formidable obstacles. My father had a family tire business in Canton, Mississippi that was fairly successful, and I think my dad wanted to try to duplicate that. The powerful desire to replicate past successes is an almost universally strong motivator for many entrepreneurs. But the capricious market, particularly for new ventures, can often be profoundly unforgiving. But unfortunately, the business failed. The collapse of the tire business delivered a devastating blow, profoundly impacting their lives not only financially, but also emotionally. Gail, with her characteristic fortitude, immense inner strength, and unwavering dedication, continued to work diligently as a highly successful NICU nurse, thereby providing the primary and often sole income for the family. However, the combined and escalating economic burden of supporting 2 young children and covering mounting rent payments, particularly after cessation of Richard's income, proved to be an overwhelming strain on a single salary. Faced with these undeniable and increasingly harsh financial realities, Gail and Richard made the incredibly difficult and emotionally arduous decision to relocate back to Jackson, Mississippi, hoping to secure a fresh start and more stable employment for Richard. So she and Richard made the difficult decision to move back to Jackson. Upon their return, Richard secured a position, as Gail understood, back with the long-established family tire company in Canton. However, his financial circumstances had irrevocably shifted downwards. He was not making the money he had made prior. The diminished income, coupled with the profound psychological weight and emotional strain of a failed business venture, created an environment ripe with marital tension, underlying friction, and mounting stress. There was a lot of stress. This toxic confluence of economic pressure shattered professional aspirations, and emotional strain ultimately fractured the once solid foundations of their once happy marriage. The failure of the tire business and the strain economically that it put on my family ended up leading to them divorcing. Yet, even in the deeply personal and often acrimonious dissolution of their marriage, Gail and Richard, to their credit, demonstrated a remarkably commendable maturity, particularly where their children's well-being was concerned. My parents got divorced in 1986, but they still got along great. I mean, it was a happy family still. It's just that they weren't married. This remarkable, often rare, post-divorce amicability, which prioritized effective co-parenting above personal grievances or lingering resentment, serve as a powerful testament to their shared, enduring commitment to their beloved sons. Following the divorce, my mom had full custody and my dad had every other weekend. They got along better post-divorce then. They did when they were married. They were very amicable. Such a healthy and functional co-parenting relationship, truly admirable and unfortunately rare in many divorces, eloquently illustrated Gail's enduring dedication to creating a stable, emotionally secure, and loving environment for her children, even in the face of her own profound personal heartache and marital dissolution. 2 years subsequent to their divorce, Richard chose to remarry, embarking on a new marital journey. Gail, however, consciously and deliberately chose a different path, remaining single and unequivocally dedicating herself, heart and soul, to the multifaceted demands and profound joys of motherhood. For her, motherhood was not merely a societal role. It was an all-encompassing identity, a profound life purpose that superseded and outshone any personal romantic aspirations. For her, motherhood came before everything else. Her children's ultimate success, their happiness, their flourishing lives, were her most cherished and overriding ambitions. My mom's greatest aspiration was to be able to see me and my brother successful and grow up to be the best we could be. Her innate, almost boundless patience, meticulously honed and perfected in the demanding, high-stakes environment of the NICU, extended effortlessly and profoundly to her own beloved sons, a wellspring of calm and understanding. I don't know how my mother could be as patient as she was with me. This boundless capacity for unconditional love, unwavering understanding, and constant, steadfast support was the undeniable hallmark of her exemplary parenting, a defining characteristic universally recognized and cherished by her children. That's what made my mother such a great mother, is how much I sensed that she cared about me. Gail's entire life, when viewed in its rich and complex totality, was an eloquent and compelling narrative of unyielding ambition, profound personal resilience, deep human connection, and an overwhelming, utterly selfless dedication to her children, a constellation of attributes that made the notion of her willingly committing suicide an act utterly inconsistent with the very fabric of her being, a betrayal of everything she fundamentally stood for, fiercely loved and deeply cherished. The journal's confession, a glimmer of personal turmoil, a veil of secrecy torn by envy. 6 arduous and dedicated years had passed since Gail assumed the challenging and profoundly important mantle of a single mother. Years she had devoted unreservedly to nurturing her beloved sons and meticulously constructing a stable, loving home, a sanctuary of peace and growth for them. Now, she was discovered dead in her bathtub, presented initially as an apparent suicide, a narrative that threatened to simplify and tragically misrepresent her complex life. The subsequent discovery of her personal journal at the scene initially offered what many interpreted as a potential, albeit deeply tragic, explanation for such an unimaginable act, providing a glimpse into her emotional struggles. Her journal found at the scene offers a potential reason for why she would end her own life. Within its intimate and deeply private pages, Gail's handwritten thoughts revealed a period of significant emotional distress, a vulnerability often, and perhaps too easily, associated with profound personal crises and depression. She had been having some problems with depression at the time. The entry spoke candidly and with raw emotion of a recent, profoundly painful breakup in her life. It describes a very unhappy breakup with a woman she had been having an apparently pretty, long-term relationship with. This deeply personal revelation regarding Gail's romantic life, particularly the clandestine nature of her relationship, came as a genuine shock to her children, hinting at a facet of her emotional world that she had, understandably, kept largely private and hidden. I never really knew that they were dating at the time, my mom and her girlfriend, but I still remember my mom on the couch after they had broken up, crying and just being very, very affected by this breakup. The raw, palpable grief and intense emotional pain expressed both in the journal and vividly recalled by her. Son painted a poignant picture of deep heartache, a profound emotional wound that could indeed contribute significantly to a depressive state. This vulnerability was real, and it formed a superficial anchor for the suicide theory. To properly and sensitively analyze this crucial element, it is imperative for a criminal psychology analyst to meticulously contextualize Gail's personal experiences within the prevailing social landscape of the early 1990s. In Mississippi in the early 90s, Having a homosexual relationship would have been a very troubling thing to do in terms of societal acceptance. The deeply conservative ethos that permeated Mississippi society during that specific era imposed immense social pressures, fostered widespread stigma, and often led to overt discrimination against individuals involved in same-sex relationships. That would cause someone to have a hard time expressing their heartache. The pervasive weight of societal disapproval, coupled with deeply ingrained cultural norms and moral judgments, frequently forces individuals into a profound state of emotional isolation, effectively preventing them from openly sharing and processing their intense personal pain without legitimate fear of judgment, ostracism, social repercussions, or even professional discrimination. Mississippi is still a conservative state, and there still is a stigma among certain people, and the climate at that time or relationship would have been defined a lot differently. This enforced secrecy and the agonizing lack of social support for her emotional struggles could, unequivocally, exacerbate feelings of depression and despair, potentially making an individual feel more acutely vulnerable, deeply alone, and isolated in their profound suffering. Such sustained emotional suppression and social isolation are well documented, powerful factors in deepening and prolonging depressive episodes. However, even with this deeply personal and undeniably influential potential motive, a broken heart compounded by significant and stifling societal pressures, not everyone at the grim scene that fateful day in May of 1992 was, for a moment, genuinely convinced that Gail Mosby had chosen to end her own life. The veteran police officer's initial instincts, his deep unease with the meticulously physical presentation of the crime scene, continued to resonate with unwavering persistence, pointing steadfastly towards an underlying anomaly that brazenly defied the superficial, comforting narrative. There was just something amiss, and it's that old police gut feeling that something was wrong. This gut feeling, often casually dismissed, is far from mere intuition. It represents the powerful, cumulative distillation of years of intensive experience, a subconscious, finely tuned recognition of subtle inconsistencies and deviations that fundamentally contradict typical human behavior in moments of ultimate crisis or profound despair. The meticulous, almost surgical order of the scene, which was initially and hastily interpreted as compelling evidence supporting a planned, deliberate suicide, now began to feel artificial, eerily pristine, almost disturbingly perfect, a calculated display. Everything was just too damn neat. It almost looked staged. This sense of unnatural, almost chilling precision, rather than a raw, often chaotic despair, or even the morbid, unsettling messiness frequently associated with a desperate, spontaneous act of self-harm, immediately raised profound red flags for the trained, skeptical eye of the investigators. A mind truly grappling with overwhelming despair often leaves behind a chaotic reflection of its internal state, not an immaculate, composed order. This profound incongruity was deeply unsettling to seasoned police professionals. There's something we're missing here, and I can't put my finger on it. The subtle whispers of suspicion were no longer mere whispers. They were transforming into a distinct, persistent, and insistent murmur, strongly suggesting that Gail Mosby's death was infinitely more complex, infinitely more sinister, and utterly deliberate than it initially appeared. The journal, while accurately reflecting genuine inner turmoil, did not, on its own, exclusively dictate the violent manner of her death, especially when its emotional context was so powerfully contradicted by the stark, undeniable forensic observations at the scene. The puzzle pieces, while individually plausible, refused to fit the picture presented, pointing instead to a darker, hidden image: the clash of authority, a detective's conviction against a coroner's dogma, and the cracking of a frame. The evening of May 24th, 1992, bore down with a heavy, oppressive burden of unresolved questions lingering ominously around perplexing death of single Mother Gail Mosby. Into this fraught and emotionally charged atmosphere stepped Jackson Police Homicide Detective Al. Ledoux, a respected and formidable figure, renowned for his keen intellect, razor-sharp wit, and an almost obsessive, unwavering